Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Yeah, are we safe? Are we ever safe?
Bullets fly at a busy Abbotsford gas station, leaving one man in hospital. Also,
his bad behavior just tarnishes everyone else. It's terrible.
A professional dog walker has his own pet seized after video shows one of them being punched. And
we need to take the proper precautions to ensure that children don't have easy access to these.
candy or cannabis? The Halloween warning from police.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
good evening. We begin tonight in Abbotsford, where there's been another shooting in a public place.
One man is in hospital and police are searching for suspects. As Leanne Young reports, this latest gun violence has residents worried about their own safety.
Shards of glass still litter the ground of this Abbotsford drive-through, remnants of yesterday's violent shooting.
Well, it's really scary. I just get my gas here. It's not very nice to hear this kind of thing.
It's 7 o'clock in the evening, right? It's crazy. There's school right here at Pembroke, right? It's scary, you know.
It happened just before 7:30 p.m. Shots fired, and immediately after, 2 vehicles fled the scene. Then a BMW SUV riddled with bullets showed up at Abbotsford Hospital. Police say this was a targeted shooting.
This male had gunshot injuries that are non-life-threatening. He's in his early 20s and South Asian.
While officers were on scene dealing with one investigation, calls came in about another. Officers were then called here to Queen Street, just a short 4-minute drive away, and there they found a torched car and what's left of it, charred remains and broken glass. Melissa Cool was at home at the time. She and her roommates heard several loud bangs, so they looked outside.
It was an orange glow that just blanketed everything, and we came out onto the step and we realized that there was fire. We could see it through the hedge, and it was a car, and it was just burning there. The whole thing was engulfed.
Whoever is responsible is still out there. No one has been arrested. The Fraser Valley is caught in the middle of a gang crisis, and perpetrators are growing increasingly bold. Last month, bullets were sprayed at a McDonald's in Aldergrove. The victim, a well-known gangster, died on the front steps. Earlier this month, a 19-year-old deemed a high risk to public safety was shot dead outside a Mission Mall.
That's Abbotsford. This is what we deal with on a daily basis, it seems. Are we ever safe, right? I don't know. It's a scary time to live in.
Alison Gutrath works with high-risk youth. She says it takes time and resources to steer young people away from dangerous lifestyles.
It's very difficult. We know that it takes a long time for anyone, especially a young person, to change the way they're thinking about something, to be motivated to really make a change in their lives.
For the people who live and work here, that time can't come soon enough. Leanne Young, CBC News, Abbotsford.
2 people have been found dead in a home in Coquitlam. Police were called to the Seton Avenue residence Monday afternoon. Inside, they found the bodies of 2 people. Today, investigators revealed one was the victim of a homicide, while the death of the other person is still being examined. They also say the pair knew each other, and the incident that led to their deaths was contained within the residence. There are no outstanding suspects in this case. IHIT is going to be at the home gathering evidence for several more days.
A longtime Vancouver dog walker's own pets have been seized. It comes after video shows animals under his care being punched and slammed into the cement.
As Joel Ballard tells us, the SPCA is now recommending criminal charges.
I do exactly the same as the Whisperer does.
He calls himself the dog talker. For more than 15 years, Glenn Affenzeller has been training and walking dogs in the forests of the North Shore.
It was abusive training techniques.
In August, the BCSPCA received a video of Affenzeller while he was out with 6 dogs.
So we're not just talking about just a different school of thought of training. What was depicted in the video absolutely crossed that line.
The BCSPCA has decided not to share the video to protect the identity of the anonymous tipster. But Moriarty says it showed Affenzeller pick up a client's dog by its face, slam it into the pavement, and repeatedly punch it with a closed fist. That video led to an investigation into Affenzeller and eventually the seizure of 4 of his own dogs by the BCSPCA.
The environment at the time that the animals were removed was inadequate in the sense that it was very unsanitary, feces, ammonia, lack of care in general for the dogs.
Affenzeller appealed that decision to the BC Farm Industry Review Board, which sided with the BCSPCA. CBC News has reached out to Affenzeller, but he did not respond. According to appeal documents, he said his actions in the video were a necessary emergency response. His client's dog became aggravated, biting down on the ear of another dog. That's when he punched it. For others in the industry, it was hard to hear.
It makes me angry, to be honest.
Barry Ruger has been walking dogs for the past decade.
Oscar, come!
He worries that the actions of one will impact the choices of many.
People who might be thinking about sending a dog out for a hike or a walk are going to think twice, and you can't blame them after a story like that.
He believes it's time to create some provincial regulation around dog walking. Right now, there is no such thing in BC.
It may be time because there is no real qualification. Anybody with a truck can load up a bunch of dogs and head out on the trails.
The BCSPCA says it plans to recommend charges against Affenzeller. If he's found guilty, his sentence can include a lifetime ban on owning or caring for animals.
Nobody should think that he's an example of what dog walkers do, because he really isn't. We're here to have a good time and make happy dogs. Zach, happy tired dogs. Oh, yeah.
Joel Ballard, CBC News, North Vancouver.
A group of young Canadians is taking the federal government to court, claiming Ottawa's inaction on climate change is hurting them. The group will be filing a lawsuit Friday. It says the federal government is contributing to high levels of greenhouse emissions and climate change. The 15 young people say they've each suffered specific injuries as a result.
The goal of this is to get the government to stop infringing on these rights and to take action that will mitigate the effects of climate change.
And their action comes as climate activists prepare for another mass climate strike in Vancouver on Friday.
And while Swedish climate change activist Greta Thunberg is attending that event on Friday, she's now dismissing claims she rejected an invitation to go to Victoria because of BC Ferries fossil fuels. Last night, she tweeted, "I don't know anything about an invitation to Victoria, and I have definitely not declined it because of emissions. I try to visit as many places as I can, but there's unfortunately not enough time to visit everywhere." The mix-up came yesterday as Victoria Mayor Lisa Helps told media Thunberg was concerned about burning fossil fuels. Now, though, it's not clear if Thunberg will, in fact, make a stop in Victoria.
The public phase of a commission looking into money laundering in BC gets underway in Vancouver tonight. The intent is to get a sense of public concerns about casinos, horse racing, gaming, and real estate as vehicles for money laundering. Commissioner Austin Cullen and his team will be holding such meetings in Kelowna, Victoria, Richmond, and Prince George. They're going to hear from experts and stakeholders over spring and fall next year. The Commission's lead counsel describes its goal this way.
A clear, meaningful, shared understanding of what money laundering is, how it happens, where the vulnerabilities are, and what kinds of changes are going to be able to equip this province to avoid our being a target destination for money laundering.
Still setting up its offices, the Commission has until May 2021 to submit its final report to the provincial government.
A warning tonight as we inch closer to Halloween. It can be hard to differentiate cannabis edibles and candy. Mounties in Burnaby have seized these edibles from a home. They also found cannabis-infused potato chips and drinks. Parents are being reminded to be more careful about leaving edibles around the house because kids may mistake them for candy.
So what we encourage is be sure to read the label carefully. Be cognizant of the fact that ingesting cannabis can last longer than inhaling cannabis. The effects of cannabis can be more intense when edible than inhaling.
While cannabis edibles are now legal, you can't actually buy them in regulated shops yet.
Young people concerned about aging out of foster care converged on the legislature in Victoria today.
Thrive, not survive!
Several dozen carried cutouts of cabinet ministers who say they are effectively their parents and family. They met with many of them, including Premier John Horgan, demanding help for teens who are left to fend for themselves when they turn 19 and are no longer the responsibility of the province. They called for mental health support as well as basic help like access to food and shelter until they can properly care for themselves.
Well, Brett, all anybody talked about today was that beautiful sunshine.
Yes, I'm so glad they did because it definitely was worth talking about. I mean, this morning was absolutely beautiful. Even into the early afternoon, we were treated to a lot of the sunshine. And then, almost as if on cue, it was too good to last. The clouds started rolling in again. And I think they are going to be here to stay, at least for much of the overnight tonight and then getting into Thursday. I wanted to show you what that looks like on our satellite and radar right now. We're not noticing anything on the radar because there really isn't any rain. It's a nice change of pace. But of course, we are seeing that cloud cover push in all across the region. That started, I would say, sort of mid-afternoon, about 3 o'clock today. In terms of what we can be expecting for our current temperatures right now, anything around 9-10 degrees, that's pretty common for this time of year and all over the region as a whole. And in general, our temperatures are not going to be budging a whole lot as we go through the overnight period and into tomorrow. It certainly will be getting a bit colder. Wanted to put together this for you so you can plan the next couple of hours. For the overnight period tonight, I'd expect the lows in Metro Vancouver to be going down to about 7 degrees or so, and as I said, those clouds will be there for the most part. Come tomorrow morning, this is going to be an interesting day. We're probably, and I say probably because I'm not even convinced about this, I think we're going to start off with a little bit of sun, but as the day goes on, then we're going to get into more and more cloud, and by tomorrow night into Friday, well, we're going to say hello to our old friend the rain, but I'll have more on that when I come back.
Talk to you in a bit. Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
Well, if you're taking a ferry between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay, you'll soon be able to enjoy a glass of beer or wine along the way.
Yeah, starting tomorrow, BC Ferries will begin selling alcohol on the route as part of a year-long pilot project. Customers of legal age will be able to buy a drink with the purchase of a buffet meal. Alcohol will be available on sailings after 11 a.m. and will be cut off 30 minutes before the ferry docks. Drinks are limited to one per customer. Passengers are not allowed to bring their own booze on the vessel, and BC Ferries says it has a zero-tolerance policy for impaired driving.
A little booze cruise.
There you go, of sorts.
Okay, also a reminder, you can also watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is available where you find other CBC programs.
CBC Vancouver also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Post-election insults are flying tonight. Coming up, why people in Newfoundland and Labrador are facing some harsh words from Albertans.
And thanks for joining us online during our regularly scheduled 3-minute television commercial break. Well, Halloween is just around the corner. It's an exciting time, of course, for kids, but for children with special needs, it's not easy to get to every door.
So this year, one woman is doing her part to ensure every child gets to enjoy the fun of trick-or-treating. Tom Steep explains.
This year, in addition to their decorations, Robin and Chris Weeks will have this bright orange sign in front of their home leading up to Halloween. The sign, which says accessible trick-or-treating, lets neighbors know their property is available to anyone with accessibility and mobility issues.
It's one of those things that you don't think about till you live it, so we had never thought about it, and then once I saw it, I thought that's something that if we could make happen here would be just really great.
5 months ago, Weeks' husband Chris was in a car accident that left him paralyzed and in a wheelchair. Recently, she read about an accessibility campaign sponsored by RE/MAX. She contacted the Charlottetown office, which provided her with her own sign.
Why shouldn't that person have the same opportunities as everyone else? And that's the point of, having an inclusive society, is that everyone is provided the same opportunities.
According to RE/MAX, last year 12,000 signs were distributed. This year, close to 30,000 will be planted on lawns across Atlantic Canada and Ontario, so children aren't left at the curb.
It's around independence, it's around inclusion, and certainly children with disabilities want to be treated the same as other children and be able to take part in community-based activities.
Weeks says she hopes more of the orange signs will be posted on front lawns before Halloween, letting families know they don't have to stay home. The Weeks are hoping the program will grow this year and in the future, ensuring all children will have an opportunity to trick or treat.
You wouldn't realize if you were a child that you couldn't come up and knock on the door, or your parents would do it for you. So it's just a nice thought that a child can come and do that themselves.
Tom Steep, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Nice indeed. Everybody should be able to take
Right
part.
up to the door,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, stay with us. We're going to be back with more post-election news right after this. Justin Trudeau held his first news conference today after Monday's federal election.
He says he's been reflecting on the result, especially on the two Western provinces that didn't elect a single Liberal MP.
People in Alberta and Saskatchewan have been suffering and struggling because of circumstances beyond their control. And we have, over the past few years, endeavored to be supportive.
As part of that, Trudeau says he's spoken to Premiers Jason Kenney and Scott Moe to make sure Western concerns are heard. And he insists his minority government will proceed with construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, a project the New Democrats oppose. Trudeau also said he's willing to work with other parties, but is ruling out a coalition. His cabinet will be sworn in on November 20th.
Climate change and how to tackle it was, of course, a top issue in this election, but only the Conservatives promised to scrap the federal carbon tax.
Now, as Kyle Bax reports, the party's second-place finish is fueling talk in the West of a new deal with the rest of Canada.
There was no landslide victory for any party, but one big winner, the carbon tax. 4 of the 5 major parties supported it, and they collected the vast majority of the vote. Roughly 2/3 of voters marked an X on the ballot for the Liberals, NDP, Greens, or Bloc Québécois. The Conservatives did not support a carbon tax. Experts say it costs the party, especially in vote-rich Ontario and Quebec.
Andrew Scheer ran on without a climate plan, when climate was the #1 issue. I think that was largely driven out of Albertan and by Alberta Conservatives, and they better wrap their head around that this issue is not disappearing. And so if they want to regain power, in whether that's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 6 months, they better come up with a real climate plan.
Despite the federal election result, the carbon tax battle isn't over. Several premiers oppose the tax, saying it has a negative impact on the economy and is an added cost for consumers.
We have, not only in Saskatchewan and Alberta, no representation in this minority government. We have a separatist party on the rise in Quebec. And it's time for us to have a very serious conversation and time for this federal government to change their direction, if you will, to engage with all Canadians and realize that they are the government and the Prime Minister for all of the people of the nation.
Saskatchewan's legal challenge of the federal policy will be heard by the Supreme Court in January. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
Well, the federal election was filled with personal attacks, and even though the race is over, the insults are still going full tilt.
Now, as Meg Roberts reports, it's people in Newfoundland and Labrador facing some harsh words from some Albertans.
Monday night, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians voted almost all red. Alberta, almost all blue. Unsurprising results in both provinces, but it's a feud between the two which is catching people off guard. Some Albertans feel like Liberal voters in this province betrayed them by not voting Conservative, particularly since many people from this province moved to Alberta for jobs. An oil advocate in Fort McMurray says the comments are made out of frustration.
The people who come and fly here work because their provinces are struggling or whatever for years. Then they leave and it's like, okay, whatever, I don't like it there. Like it hurts.
Chris Ledrew is one St. John's resident who took to Facebook to voice his opinion. He says most of the people he's seen complaining are Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who have moved to Alberta, and he finds the insults rather petty.
I don't see very many people, lazy people around here, so these stereotypes bother me, especially when most of the people I know are really hard-working people who are still in Newfoundland, mind you, and still here, helping to maintain the success of this place. And this is a thriving province, contrary to what a lot of people think.
Ledrew also points to the numbers. In Newfoundland and Labrador, total votes for the Liberals numbered just over 107,000. In Alberta, the total votes for the Liberals were over 280,000. Despite the population differences, more people in Alberta voted Liberal than in Newfoundland and Labrador. Jim Brown, a CBC journalist who has worked in St. John's and now in Calgary, says Albertans are feeling vulnerable right now, but he doesn't expect this online drama to last. And the drama is mainly contained to social media, not real life.
This is just a little dumpster fire that's been blown out of proportion because Facebook and Twitter blow everything out of proportion. It's not who Albertans are. It's not who Newfoundlanders in Alberta are. It's just a little wacko, bizarre eruption that hopefully we will have all forgotten about by the end of the weekend.
While this divide on social media may fizzle, many political analysts say the election has exposed regional divisions across Canada that Justin Trudeau will have to tackle. Meg Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Meanwhile, others in Alberta that are unhappy with Monday's election result are calling for the Western Canada to separate from the rest of the country.
The idea has gotten some traction on social media. It's not sitting well with Manitoba's premier.
Well, I don't think you ever get anywhere in building a stronger relationship by threatening to leave it, so I don't have any time for that. I think you got to work together. You overcome your difficulties together. Don't threaten to leave. I listened to this from Quebec for years, and I don't like listening to it from Western Canadian friends of mine. So no, I have no time for that kind of thing. We're going to make the country work. We work together on it. We make a commitment to it. It's a relationship. My wife and I have been together for 35 years, and we don't get stronger as a couple by threatening to leave every week.
Okay, Ottawa's City Council has rejected a controversial councillor's request for a medical leave of absence. Rick Chiarelli has been accused by a number of women of inappropriate behavior in the workplace.
Today, as Joanne Chianello reports, a unanimous decision means he'll have to show up for the next council meeting if he wants to keep his job.
Councillor McKenney. No. Councillor Moffat.
No. One by one, councillors said no, and what had been simmering for months was decided in minutes. Councillor Rick Chiarelli losing his bid for a leave of absence, an unheard of decision at City Hall.
As you saw today, there was precious little support for Councillor Chiarelli, and I think as more allegations come forward, it becomes more disgusting and very upsetting as to what was going on in his office for what appears to be many, many months, if not years.
City Council voted after CBC reported new allegations from a former Chiarelli staffer. Brittany Lees is the 13th woman to describe inappropriate behavior from the beleaguered councillor. Her story is similar to what other women have described, being asked to wear revealing clothing and being taken to bars to recruit so-called volunteers.
We left, we drove around Montreal, and then he pulled out a little red dress and said, "You need to go and get some volunteers at this club."
Lees quit after 18 months, but this summer she says she got a phone call from Chiarelli. He asked if she'd return to work, but Lees was stunned by what he said after she told him she'd lost weight.
He was like, "That's good. Can you still wear the clothes? And did you lose your boobs?"
Chiarelli has denied all allegations. He put out his own statement earlier this month saying he's never treated anyone in an inappropriate manner. He claims it's all part of an orchestrated political strategy against him. He also protested that the identities of some of his accusers were kept confidential. The statement infuriated some of the women who've come forward. Victoria Lauber says Chiarelli asked her to wear a see-through shirt without a bra.
You can't make that stuff up. You can't. And to say that it's anonymous, hi, my name's Victoria. I'm not anonymous. Sorry.
Now that council has denied his leave, Shirelli will have to show up here for work by the end of November, or his seat will be declared vacant. But in his latest salvo, Shirelli has said this week that he will go to court to try to stop the Integrity Commissioner's investigation into his behavior. Joanne Chianello, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Royal Canadian Navy is marking a grim anniversary. 50 years ago, the destroyer HMCS Kootenay was participating in naval exercises off the coast of England when a fiery explosion suddenly rocked the ship. 9 sailors were killed and 53 others were injured in the worst peacetime disaster in Canadian naval history. A commemorative service was held today in Halifax, where Colleen Jones met with survivors.
They came, their Kootenay jackets proudly on, the blue Kootenay ribbon over their hearts. These men, known as the Kootenay family, and the disaster they survived has shaped their lives in every way. Alan Kennedy was in the engine room when the explosion happened. The fire and heat was everywhere.
I'm not sure I'm going to get out of this. I'm not sure whether I'm ever going to see my wife and my young son again.
This is painful still to talk about it 50 years later.
It is.
Anybody that says that they weren't scared, there's something wrong.
Douglas Moore remembers it like it was yesterday.
We had to deal with the dirty deeds, and I was one of the ones taking bodies out of the engine room and stuff like that. It all stays in your head.
The year of the disaster, 1969. Post-traumatic stress wasn't even an idea yet.
They kick you in the butt, say get on with it. Have another drink.
That's Jim Oliver.
My drug of choice, as I say, was alcohol. I did that for quite a few years.
He's been sober for years, thanks, he says, to this man, Dinger. Alan Bell has been the glue that keeps the Kootenay family together.
Nobody wanted to die. Everybody was on fire.
Chief Petty Officer, First Class, Vaino Ski Partanen.
Vaino Partanen was one of the heroes who died.
I remember him picking up the phone and contacting the bridge and said, "Do we have a fire in the engine room?"
His daughter, Leslie, was almost 14 years old when her father died. Events like this are too difficult to attend. Her memories to hold on to, the Canadian flag that covered her father's casket, and a photo album of his funeral in England she and her late mother were unable to attend. The Kootenay tragedy came at a time when the dead were not repatriated. That changed after the explosion. Her other memory is this. Her father received the first ever Cross of Valor. She has donated it permanently to the Navy Museum for all to see.
So that people will understand that he did something. He did something wonderful, and he should be recognized for it.
There were many heroes on that day, and as the music played, prayers were said, wreaths laid for the surviving crew members. They are a band of brothers, and they keep counting on each other 50 years later. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
It's not just another story about Lower Mainland gang violence. After the break, a new film out of Surrey that aims to turn every stereotype on its head.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Yeah, are we safe? Are we ever safe? Right? I don't know. It's a scary time to live in.
Another shooting in a public place in Abbotsford, this time at a gas station. One man in hospital. And while police say the public isn't at risk, residents remain concerned.
The BCSPCA executed a warrant on his property and ended up seizing 4 dogs meeting the definition of distress.
A longtime Vancouver dog walker has had his own pets seized. It comes after video surfaced showing one of the dogs being punched and slammed into the concrete. Now the SPCA is recommending criminal charges.
Somebody with a keen eye might be able to make that difference. However, the reality is, if you're a child, you probably won't be able to.
Police are warning cannabis edibles and candy can look very similar. They're reminding parents to double-check Halloween candies and keep your own edibles in a safe place so kids don't get them mixed up at home. Well, for years we've heard about drugs and guns and the effect it's had on Metro Vancouver. Well, now a new film aspires to take us inside the experiences of young South Asians caught up in that world.
Move over.
Monsters filmmaker says it shows a more realistic version of gang life in Surrey.
Inderveer Sodhi is the director and writer. He also acts in the film and composed the music. Now, Inderveer, we cover shooting after shooting. We talk about gang violence. It's been decades, really, in Metro Vancouver, in the Lower Mainland, and the story is often the same. What does your film do differently to tell that story?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not an action flick. It doesn't glamorize the violence. It's an empathetic viewpoint that many of us don't get to see. So it's a coming-of-age drama, and you get to see my character when he's 10 years old, 18, and 20, and you follow his life and how the relationships in his life change with his mother, new people, his friends, and how that shapes him. And it's also different because it's made by youth, about 30, a little bit more than 30 people around my age. I'm 21. And everyone worked on a voluntary basis to put this story together.
Okay, so that is you. You are acting in the film. Did you take from any personal experience to create it?
Part of the character Harman, like his relationship with his mom in the film is very much derived from my personal life, but everything else is an accumulation of people I saw growing up in high school, people I've heard about on the news. So the character is a composite of all those people, and the story was written by looking back at all the experiences and seeing how people changed. Yeah, and I think a thing that was a little hard to do was pick up the nuances, because I really hope when you see the film, you don't see me, you see that character. Yeah.
As any actor always hopes for.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your relationship with your mom, and this film really goes into that, the relationship between parents and kids.
Yeah.
How and why did you choose to base that?
Part of the inspiration for making the film came from my relationship with my mom and how close she is with me, and how much I cherish that connection. And I know so many guys who are part of this environment or get caught up in that lifestyle have that same relationship, you know? I don't think my film tries to go into a stereotypical viewpoint where there's necessarily a bad relationship with the parents. And unfortunately, a lot of parents have to lose their kids and they have to live with that for the rest of their life. And that emotion really struck me, and that's what drove me to create the film and create it in an emotional way. I didn't want to make a documentary. I wanted to create something where people could see themselves in the characters and reflect and think, you know what, if something had just happened slightly different with me, I could have been that, or that could have happened to me.
And were you able to accomplish what you hoped for?
I think so. We had a premiere last Thursday. Along with the public, there was police officers, retired police officers, and people part of Surrey Crime Prevention, and they thought that the film was very accurate, and there's no bigger compliment to that than that to me, besides the emotional reaction that everyone else had. So I hope everyone else gets to watch it and has the same reaction.
All right, thank you, Inderveer Sodhi.
Thank you so much.
6:36, a live look at downtown Vancouver tonight, BC Place. As meteorologist Brett Soderholm told us yesterday at this time, the clouds would be rolling in tonight. They have, but the sun is poised to make a comeback. He's going to tell us when next. yesterday at this time, oh so boldly predicting that the clouds would be rolling in tonight at this time. And
yeah.
there you go.
And here we are.
Here you are.
There was that sunshine this morning,
Yes.
though. That was nice.
A lot of it.
Did you get out to enjoy it at least a little bit?
Oh, yes. It was wonderful.
It felt so nice. I'm noticing, though, that the sun is not rising nearly as high as it used to in the sky. Sunrise this morning, 7:45 now, and the sun is setting at about 6:15. So the days are getting shorter, losing about 3 minutes a day, as it were. So. Anyways, with that said, have a look at this beautiful start to the day that we saw this morning. It really was quite nice. Now, we didn't actually see the sunrise in that specific shot, but if you were out this morning, you know what I was talking about. Feeling that warmth, the sunshine, just making everything feel very crisp, very fall-like. It was really a great day to be out there. Now, of course, the afternoon, we did see a few more clouds build in, and that is, of course, going to be the trend as we get toward the end of the week, but I'm already excited for this weekend. It is looking really nice. But let's take this one step at a time, shall we? For the remainder of the overnight period, I wanted to mention we're still going to be looking at temperatures largely going down to about 7 or 8 degrees, a little cooler toward Richmond and Surrey, as always. But by the afternoon tomorrow, we're going to be getting into temperatures right around 12 or 13 degrees for many. It's kind of a boring forecast. You know that it's largely just going to be cloudy in the afternoon, but I do have my eye on this next wave of rain that is likely going to be coming across, more so for areas to our west Thursday afternoon. But I wanted to zoom in here to just show you that come Friday morning, this is going to be a round of showers very quick for us into the morning, while it will be clearing out by the afternoon. And to give you a better shot of what that's going to be like, just to slow it down a little bit here, because I know that first one did go by quite quickly, really between the hours of 7, 8, and 9 o'clock on Friday morning, that's when that rain is going to be coming through. But then even by the afternoon, I would expect the sun to come out one more time, and that is really going to set the stage quite nicely for our weekend. The overall rainfall totals, I know we've seen quite a fair bit of rain over the past week. This is really only about another 5 millimeters or so. So just a quick little blip on the radar, as it were, and that will set the stage very nicely for this forecast. I'm so happy to show you we're going to get through Thursday and Friday, as I said, just a few showers, but Saturday and Sunday, and then even into Monday. And if I could extend this forecast, I would show sun right until next Wednesday. We've got a nice area of high pressure that's going to be keeping everything beautiful, sunny, though admittedly, the numbers there at the bottom of Sunday, temperatures, overnight lows, looking at about 2 degrees or so. So that is going to be on the chilly side, but I will gladly take that and a break for the rain.
I mean, on the days that you want to make it, that you want to brag about the sun, you can always make it the 10-day forecast.
It's true. I'll do that.
Just a different graphic. Just add more in there. Exactly. All right. Figuring out which piece of garbage goes in what bin can be kind of tough. It's probably why more than 25% of Toronto's recycling, 25%, is contaminated.
Yeah, but as Natalie Nanowski reports, students from the University of Toronto have created a bin that tries to take out the guesswork out of sorting trash.
So the user just, let's say, the user just places the waste into the brains of RoboBin.
And with the simple push of a button, the machine does the rest. A little camera scans the item and determines whether it's waste, recycling, or...
If you see, RoboBin identifies apple as organic.
The 5 graduate students say the idea came to them when they couldn't figure out where to toss their trash.
Even if we try to make an educated guess, we go wrong.
And most people do. That's because the rules for things like plastic vary between cities and even between office buildings. The RoboBin, a small computer that attaches to a waste bin, can be programmed to tackle all of that.
So what it's doing is basically analyzing each and every pixel separately, and then finds out like what's the best description for the content over there.
The team entered this year's global KPMG Ideation Challenge and won against 600 submissions.
So this team in particular brought to life the business case for their idea by reference to talking about the number of bins at a theme park and the amount of waste that is then generated in a theme park, and we're able to really talk about the dollars that could be saved around, you know, recycling or taxes or the waste management.
Right. Getting it working wasn't easy. They had to upload more than 35,000 images to teach their computer to differentiate between recycling, compost, and waste. It gets even more tedious. To get the machine to recognize something like an apple, they had to show it all different types: red, green, yellow, half-eaten apples, and even apple cores.
We want to implement it on a very local scale, and do a test run in our neighborhood.
The goal is to have machines like this in place in buildings in the next few years.
They're in discussions with some organisations about taking it further, and I think people get it.
The team estimates the robo-bin could save cities millions and solve at least part of the world's waste problem. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, I'm first in line for this.
Yeah.
Need it at home, need it at the office.
Absolutely at the office. I mean, to make those decisions using an AI, like an artificial intelligence system, that takes some very smart people. So
Because they just moved some of the bins over to your
Right
area.
next
You
to
become
that.
the last line of defense,
Well,
right?
you hear us complaining all the time. Which
Where
bin
do I
does it
put
go
this?
in?
It's so true. Yeah, amazing though.
Good idea.
Hong Kong formally scraps the extradition bill that sparked months of unrest. But are the protests over? That's after the break.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Get your tickets to the Chutzpah Festival today. Catch culturally diverse performances in comedy, music, theater, and dance at this one-of-a-kind festival. And join CBC Vancouver's Mike Killeen on November 5th as he hosts this year's Power 50. He'll reveal this year's movers and shakers according to Vancouver Magazine. For more on these events, check us out online.
Authorities in Hong Kong have formally scrapped the extradition bill that sparked months of unrest.
The controversial bill would have allowed suspected criminals to be sent to mainland China.
But as the CBC's Sasha Petrusik reports, the original call for protests has transformed into a larger campaign for democratic reform.
The Hong Kong government moved to formally withdraw the deeply unpopular extradition bill, which set off almost 5 months of protesting in the streets, which has now turned into something that looks much more like rioting. Protesters have become more violent. The police have also become much more violent. And so these battles go on the streets, despite the fact that the original spark that started all of this is now gone. Protesters have actually moved on from that demands that bill be withdrawn to demand that the police be investigated by an independent body of some kind and that the chief executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, resign. She has refused to even discuss any of these demands beyond the fact that she withdraw the bill. The extradition bill would have allowed people from Hong Kong to be extradited to mainland China to face its unpredictable and harsh justice system. That is gone now, but many of the fears that China is intervening, the fears that people in Hong Kong are losing their rights and freedoms, those fears remain. And so the protests and the street battles continue. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Beijing.
A horrifying discovery about 40 kilometers east of the British capital. Police have found a transport truck with 39 people dead inside.
As Renee Filipponi reports, it appears to be one of the worst human smuggling tragedies the UK has ever seen.
The truck where the bodies of 39 people were found has been moved from this industrial complex to Tilbury Docks, not far east. Police will then be able to continue the forensic work needed to try and identify the victims. 39 people were found early this morning, 38 adults, and it's believed one teenager. A 25-year-old man from Northern Ireland has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is being held in custody.
I will not be commenting on speculation of the identity of this man. At this stage, we have not identified where the victims are from or their identities, and we anticipate this could be a lengthy process.
Essex police say now the truck arrived on a ferry from Belgium, not Wales, as was earlier believed, and that it arrived in this complex just after 1 a.m. this morning. The truck is registered in Bulgaria, but authorities say it hasn't been in the country for years. The major questions right now are focused on the nationality of the victims, where the truck came from, and where it was going, and if this could have had anything to do with human trafficking.
The whole House will be shocked by the appalling news that 39 bodies have been discovered in a lorry container in Essex. This is an unimaginable tragedy and truly heartbreaking. I know that the thoughts and prayers of all members are with those who lost their lives and their loved ones.
Comparisons are being made to past cases where dozens of individuals were being smuggled into the UK or across the EU and ended up dead in container trucks. At this point, police are not giving any information about the victims, only asking if anyone with information would contact them. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Grays, Essex.
The U.S. president saying today he will lift all sanctions imposed on Turkey after the country said it's making a ceasefire with Kurdish fighters in northern Syria permanent.
Arthi Pohl has the latest on Trump's announcement.
The U.S. president declared he has reached a resolution with Turkey on the situation in northeast Syria, and Turkey would be rewarded for its cooperation with the U.S.
Early this morning, the government of Turkey informed my administration that they would be stopping combat and their offensive in Syria and making the ceasefire permanent. I've therefore instructed the Secretary of the Treasury to lift all sanctions imposed.
It was earlier this month Trump was heavily criticized for withdrawing U.S. troops from the region, essentially abandoning Kurdish allies after fighting alongside them for 5 years in the battle to contain ISIS. The withdrawal opened the door for a Turkish incursion into northeast Syria. Criticism of that move by the U.S. continued today in Washington as lawmakers held a hearing investigating Trump's actions in Syria.
We handed them over to be slaughtered and ethnically cleansed from a region where they've lived for generations.
Turkish forces moving in after the departure of American troops also resulted in the escape of as many as 100 ISIS fighters that had been captured and secured in the region by the Kurds. Trump alleged most had been recaptured, although his defense secretary contradicted that statement, saying the whereabouts of many of the ISIS escapees is unknown at this time. And the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria says he was blindsided by the U.S. decision to withdraw.
It is the duty of a commander-in-chief to make such decisions with the support or the consultation of the U.S. Congress and the American people.
Trump said today some U.S. troops would remain in the region to protect oil fields, but most troops will be leaving.
Let someone else fight over this long, blood-stained sand.
Russian military police have already arrived in Kobani to help patrol the Syrian border and ensure Kurdish forces leave the area. Russia and Turkey will now enforce the tentative ceasefire in northeast Syria. Arti Pol, CBC News, Washington.
7 years ago, BC's Brett Hayden retired from competitive swimming, but this past summer, his fire to compete was rekindled. We'll hear what reignited his passion and what he hopes to achieve next.
Thursday on the Early Edition, we'll continue to break down what a liberal minority government means for issues that matter to British Columbians. Tomorrow, we look at affordable housing. That's on the Early Edition beginning at 5 a.m. on CBC Radio 1.
A former world champion and Olympic bronze medal swimmer Brent Hayden is making a comeback 7 years after retiring from the sport.
Yeah, and he's set a lofty goal. The Mission native has his eyes on winning a medal at next summer's Olympics in Tokyo.
Hayden became a world champion in 2007 and won a bronze medal at the 2012 Olympics in London, but he retired after feeling physically broken and spiraling into depression. Since then, he's gotten married, started a photography business, and launched a clothing line with his wife, all while staying away from swimming. But that changed this past summer when he dove back into the pool to shoot a training video.
I just kind of fell in love with being in the water again, and all those old memories of the things that I loved about swimming started coming back. Whereas before, every time I got in, it was all the things that I hated about it, and that was the spiral towards depression I was going through, the chronic back spasms, and that I was experiencing like all the time, right? It was really painful, and this time it was the first time I got in, and it was like, felt good energy.
Hayden still holds the Canadian records at 3 distances, but to give himself the best chance of landing on the podium In Tokyo, he'll focus exclusively on the pure sprint 50-meter freestyle event. And he hopes to bring another Olympic medal home next summer.
Always good to see a local guy back at it.
He's ferociously competitive. I think it's fair to say he's pretty fit, too.
I was going, it's better you say that.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's in good shape, and, you know, he may have a shot there. He may have a shot.
So as one elite swimmer returns to competition, another set of paddlers have just kicked off their world championship, a group of doggy paddlers, that is.
Yes, the annual Dock Dog World Championship in Iowa is underway. Hundreds of pooches and their human friends have gathered for the aquatic canine jumping competitions. Dogs can compete in 4 events: long jump, high jump, speed retrieval, and iron dog, which is that's a combination of all the events. The Grand Championship will take place on Sunday and can be viewed via live stream online. The show's gone to the dogs.
How would your dog, Max, compete there?
Terrible. He'd just stand there and bark at everybody, I think. He doesn't like the water. Doesn't like the water, doesn't like the rain. No competition for him.
All right, that's it for us tonight. Dan is here at 11 o'clock after the National.
Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.